Welcome to EFFector from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. You're listening to an audio companion to our email newsletter, keeping you on the cutting edge of digital rights issues. I'm your host, Hudson Hongo, and this week we'll be talking about the importance of the right to repair. It's now the law in Washington State, thanks to two recently signed bills. I'm joined today by Haley Tsukayama, Associate Director of Legislative Activism at EFF. How are you, Haley?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm having a nice Friday. So, taking it from the absolute top, at the most basic level, what is right to repair?
Yeah, sure. So right to repair, I really actually like the name because I think it is pretty there are many terms we use in legislative language that make no sense, but right to repair is one that does. It basically says that, things that you buy, you should be able to fix if they break. So, I think we've all had like an exciting night, dropped our phones, cracked the screen, and not wanted to necessarily go into an Apple store and have them pay Apple store prices to have things repaired. And so thought, man, it'd be nice if I could get the part myself to fix this, or if I could find an independent repairer to fix this, and maybe they'd give me a better price. So right to repair basically says companies should let people repair their devices or take them to independent repair shops to get them repaired. And that means that they should make public things like make available for purchase and make parts available for purchase, make it possible to download manuals and instructions on how to fix basic things. Obviously most people probably don't feel comfortable truly opening up their phone and getting in and into everything. But certainly for some of these more basic repairs, I think that's something that a lot of people want.
And the ability to choose, if not themselves, who else might be able to fix it, right?
Yeah, totally. So I think we have all been in situations where only one company can, the manufacturer usually of a device is the only one who can fix it. And it's if you live in a rural area where there isn't an Apple store nearby or something like that can actually be a big liability. So just being able to say oh, can I go down the street to the repair shop? They can get the parts, they can do the labor for me. That's a very important thing for people to be able to do.
So Washington State has two new laws enshrining the right to repair. How specifically do they protect that right?
Yeah, so in Washington, the law basically says companies have to make parts and manuals and tools available for people to repair consumer electronics and some household goods. And then you can also choose to pick someone to do that for you, so you don't necessarily have to go to the manufacturer. So that was one bill. And then there was also in Washington State, they passed a bill specifically about the right to repair on personal mobility devices. So wheelchairs, for example, power wheelchairs. And I think that is another super common sense bill, because obviously if people are depending on devices to get around day to day, and there's a small thing that happens, a motor runs down or something happens to a tire or something, you want them to be able to fix that as quickly as possible and not have to make an appointment with a technician or go to a specific place to be able to fix that. So those are the two.
What is the difference between a strong right to repair law and a weak one?
Great question. There are a couple of things that I look for when I read through a right to repair law, right? So I do think it depends on your legislature, but generally I think it's important to make sure that it covers a fairly broad range of devices. So obviously there might be some cases where it makes sense given state laws to break out, something like medical devices or, whatever, if they're governed by a different set of rules. But generally you don't want it to just be smartphones or just be laptops or whatever, right? You want it to be pretty broad. I like it best when they also throw household appliances in there, because I think we're increasingly seeing companies, especially as there's more software and smart devices that come up, increasingly seeing companies be no, you need for your washer, for your dryer, it needs to be us. It can't just be a random person. So I look for the range of devices. That's one thing. Another thing that we really look for is being able to say it's not enough to just say that individuals can get these, but that they're that independent repair shops are included. There are a lot of people who want to tinker with their own devices, but that's not everybody. And so it's important that we're really giving people a meaningful choice in these laws. And then the other thing I would say is that increasingly we've seen companies understanding that right to repair is really popular. So they're like trying to figure out, ways to support it, but be a little tricky. So we've seen them do what's called parts pairing. So, for example, I mentioned like a broken screen earlier. Like if your screen breaks, you should be able to just buy the screen and whatever you need to attach the screen. They shouldn't be like, no, you need to buy a whole display assembly. And we have seen companies kind of say that. So we have the best right to repair laws have sort of language that prohibits that sort of bundling together, right? You can't just only sell things in chunks. You have to actually give people just the parts that they need.
Are you seeing any sort of larger trends in the right to repair space over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite areas to work in, actually, because the advocacy on this started long before me, long before I got to EFF. And they've really had a pretty extraordinary run of wins in the past, I don't know, 5 to 6 years, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, it's so important to just keep showing up and saying what you need to say, because it went from being an issue that people are like, I get it, but I don't think I can get it through my legislature, to like, it's just been like win after win after win in the right to repair space. So I think there's been increasingly a lot of recognition that, especially for consumer electronics, for smartphones, tablets, that kind of thing, that it's really necessary legislation. So we've seen them, pass with big margins. We've seen them pass bipartisan. These are fairly new trends. We hadn't really seen that sort of broad support. And then I think we're also seeing a trend now, more people are kind of getting involved in the discussions. So we've had a lot of discussion about tractors, agricultural specific right to repair bills, so we've been seeing those get introduced, and none of them have really made it all the way through, but I think that's like a new frontier that's emerging. And that makes, it just makes a lot of sense in the same way that you don't want to wait for a specific technician from the company to get sent out to fix something like a wheelchair. If you're a farmer and your tractor or your harvester or whatever breaks at the worst time, you don't want to have to wait for somebody to, especially since it's often in such a rural area, you don't have to wait for somebody to drive out. You want to be able to just like fix it yourself or take it to the guy down the street. And so I think we're definitely seeing more support for that. I think it's going to be a bit of a fight because there are a lot of companies that are really opposed to agricultural right to repair, but I do think it's a really important one.
Well, I think you answered a big part of my next question, which was how did Washington get here? But also with that, I wanted to ask you what people can do as individuals to support and fight for right to repair.
Yeah. So I will say, building off my last answer, Washington they took several runs at this bill, right? They took several runs at the bill. They really, every time, tried to build up momentum and get more people in the coalition. There are a ton of groups in Washington that, like on the ground in Washington, that came together on this bill, who really deserve a lot of credit, right? Because it's hard to show up in a Capitol building year after year and say, hey, remember us? We're running the same bill and we're going to have the same conversation. So I give a lot of credit to like Washington PIRG and the groups that they pulled together. So I think that's persistence is essentially how they managed to get this bill through in Washington. In terms of what people can do, I mean, we're a part of the Repair Coalition, EFF, so I'd encourage people who are interested in sort of the overall trends to go to repair.org. They have a great map kind of showing, the state of laws and bills in the country at any given moment. And so that is one thing. I will also say always, EFF's Action Center, if there is a good bill that we are really trying to push in the state, including on right to repair, you can always find the action there at act.eff.org.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining me this week, Haley. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me.